Wild speculation about more teams potentially breaking Formula One's cost cap means one way or another, the championship seems to be heading for another controversy. Cost cap chatter has been rife in the F1 paddock and spilled over into public comments from various figures, prompting an irate response from the FIA. As last year's controversy around Red Bull's 2021 breach lingers into this season, given its ongoing dominance, this is an extremely sensitive matter. And the FIA trying to quash rumours is just the start of what's likely to be a long drawn-out saga with extremely high stakes. F1's financial regulations were introduced in 2021. It marked the first time a cost cap was implemented, forcing big teams to cut their spending in an attempt to make the championship more competitive. And there was immediately a problem. In late 2022, almost a full year after the previous season had ended, the FIA finally concluded its analysis of the 2021 cost cap submissions and found two teams had committed breaches, Aston Martin and Red Bull. Aston Martin's was only procedural, which meant some administrative inaccuracies, not an overspend, so it got off lightly. Red Bull's was a so-called minor breach of less than 5% of the cost cap, meaning it spent too much money in 2021. There were rumours of breaches before the issue exploded into the public eye at the Singapore Grand Prix at the end of September, and through various official and unofficial developments continued for a month until it was formally resolved with confirmation of the two teams' respective offences and punishments. Now, history seems to be sort of repeating itself. We shouldn't implicate any teams specifically, but in the F1 paddock, potential breaches from 3 teams are being talked about, even though the accounting process is still a long way from being finished. The FIA is really unhappy about this, which is why it's been moved to issue a stern retort. It says speculation that some teams may have breached the cost cap in 2022 is completely unfounded. The process is still ongoing and no teams have been given their certification status. This relates to whether they complied or committed a breach. The FIA has said that auditing fieldwork is still ongoing, it's scheduled to conclude in the coming weeks and will take longer after that to finalise the review. We've heard the FIA talk like this before, during last year's cost cap rumours. Back then the FIA said that Red Bull and Aston Martin talk was significant and unsubstantiated speculation and conjecture, and yet it turned out to be true, so perhaps this will as well. It would certainly appear possible that suspicions of an offence may have arisen through the process so far, with repeat visits and requests for more information as the FIA scrutinises each submission and demands more information from the teams. One key difference is that right now the process isn't anywhere near as advanced as it was in Singapore last year, so any suggestion that a breach has been committed and confirmed, even in private, doesn't appear to reflect reality, and the FIA wants to make that clear. This is an extremely sensitive matter for 2 reasons. The first relates to the general principle of the financial regulations. It's absolutely critical that the cost cap is applied rigorously because it has a defining impact on the competitiveness of the teams, and killing the cap would be a huge problem. And that could happen. The cost cap is still immature and hasn't been properly stress tested. The FIA threw Red Bull a bit of leniency last year, given 2021 was the first year of the cap, on the proviso that future breaches would be handled more severely. Teams need to fear the outcome to avoid thinking a breach would be worthwhile, and we're still in the phase of having the cap being reinforced or undermined. The second part is that Red Bull was punished for a minor breach last year, but rightly or wrongly there is still a cloud hanging over F1 this season due to the nature of that penalty. Officially, Red Bull overspent in 2021 by £1.8 million, which is what the team's rivals and critics refer to. But at the time, the FIA noted that this would have dropped to £432,000 had a notional tax credit been correctly applied by Red Bull, so that's the number the team uses. For that, Red Bull was fined $7 million and hit with a 10% reduction of the aerodynamic testing allowance it's entitled to for a 12-month period running to October 2023. Red Bull called it draconian, rivals said it got off lightly, and there's remained an undercurrent of unhappiness among those who feel the punishment was too lenient because the overspend could have helped Red Bull in its ultra-tight 2021 title fight with Mercedes and helped it prepare for the brand new 2022 technical regulations as well, which Red Bull is still dominating. We're now halfway through 2023 and Red Bull's still cleaning up. It's won every single race this season, and unsurprisingly, one side of the argument believes this is proof Red Bull's gained a clear and lasting advantage from breaching F1's first cost cap, and the penalty has done nothing to address that. But regardless of whether Red Bull has been punished insufficiently or has just done a brilliant job mitigating a tangible penalty, this all shows that the discourse around the cost cap can linger for a long time. To protect the integrity of the cost cap, further offences, whether by Red Bull or any team, in 2022 must be met with stricter punishments. Minor breaches can be worth millions of dollars, as Red Bull found out last year, but given this doesn't come out of a team's cost cap for future seasons, it's a pretty paltry sanction. And a wide range of penalties can be applied, depending on whether it's a minor or material breach: docking teams and drivers' points, suspensions, limitations on aerodynamic or other testing, reductions in future cost cap allowances, and even championship exclusions. The FIA has promised that if there are any breaches, the regulations will fine them and there will be consequences. But the question is, how severe will those consequences be, with even F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali wading in to push for sporting penalties, much to the FIA's annoyance at the commercial rights holder discussing regulatory matters. As the process comes to an end, it seems likely that the rumours have been started by senior figures in the paddock looking to put pressure on the FIA and scrutiny on the whole situation. It's important to the FIA that outside observers understand there's no fixed deadline to avoid prejudicing the robustness and effectiveness of their review. The FIA doesn't want to rush and compromise the process, but it might also want to make it clear that speculation can't arise from leaks ahead of an imminent formal announcement that everyone can anticipate. As we've said, last year's rumours spread in late September but weren't confirmed until mid to late October, and the punishments were made official at the end of that month. So that part was quite drawn out, but the big takeaway was that Max Verstappen had won the 2022 title by the time we all knew for sure that lingering questions over the 2021 season were officially settled. The FIA wanted to conclude proceedings quicker this year to avoid an outcome coming nearly a full year after the previous season finished once again. To try to achieve that, there are 10 full-time employees working on the process now compared to 4 last year. But the financial regulations are still immensely complicated and the FIA's process of policing them is demanding. Teams had to lodge 2 submissions for the 2022 cost cap. There was an interim deadline on June 30th last year to allow teams to understand where they are in the projected spending and for the FIA to try to anticipate any discussion that may take place as a result. Then a full submission was due by March 31st this year. The FIA is quite far into the review of the 2022 submissions, but they are between 150 and 200 pages each, so it's hardly the work of a moment. The first month after the final deadline is dedicated to an in-depth review of the information to see what may merit further analysis. The FIA then initiates follow-up questions, requests more documentation, and conducts on-site audits, which began in May. Those in charge of this say that people have to be realistic with their expectations. It's not a 1-month process and it never will be, especially if the initial findings merit the need to open a formal investigation with lawyers and advisory boards getting involved. So the bottom line is a resolution isn't imminent. It will probably be several weeks after the summer break and may well end up on a similar timeline to last year. The process may well be better handled now, but the time taken could end up quite similar if there's more than one instance of potential overspending to investigate, more information being requested, and more communication than before to try to avoid any potential misunderstandings. Whether it ends the same way or not, with breaches being confirmed, F1's heading for another controversy regardless. There are clearly suspicions among several teams that rivals have committed wrongdoing and agendas at play to pile on the pressure, which means the speculation won't stop. And if this ends with anyone being found guilty and getting hit with penalties, you can bet there will be a big dispute over whether the punishment fits the crime.